start the recording. Okay, here we go. Now I'm recording. So step one, find the people, and that's generating your new leads. You know, as you get started, you'll find that sometimes you feel like it's not going quickly enough, and most of your weekly productivity points are all from new leads. That's normal. But if you're adding 5 to 10 new leads a day, you are doing awesome. You're on track, and those will eventually filter down the funnel and turn into appointments, presentations, and sales. Step two is just call the people. This also means text the people, email the people, but see the people. So you have to spend the time on the phone. You have to put in the time reaching out, making that first contact, starting that conversation. Number three is physically see the people. So get in the door, either getting them to the funeral home or physically going to their home, whichever is most comfortable for them. Next is just tell the story. So make sure you have a good presentation. It doesn't mean you have to have a perfect or a polished presentation, but it has to be genuine and it has to come from your heart, and you have to have a story to tell. Now, this does not mean you have to tell a personal story about loss with you, but you do have to have a compelling reason that families decide to move forward with this now. We're going to get more to that. But number 5 is close the sale. If we're not asking for the money, you know, Joseph called me about one yesterday that was great, and the guy kind of the whole time it was all business. I'm not doing anything today, all of that. But you still ask for the money. He didn't sell it yesterday, but I said if you have that appointment 10 times, you'd probably sell it 5 or 6 out of the 10 times. No matter what they say, you still have to make an attempt to close the sale. Don't feel embarrassed. They know that's why you're there. They know that's what you do. Always ask for the money. And then number 6, help more people. So ask for referrals. Some of you just do this. It's second nature. You can't even imagine not asking for referrals. Some people were still kind of getting in the habit, but it's like everything else. The more we do it, the more comfortable it feels. And then number 7, start over every day. Just get up. It's the key is the consistency. We talked about that a couple weeks ago on our PowerPoint about the compound effect. So not only is each ingredient important, but they have to be added in the right order. So we don't want to sell or present over the phone. We don't want to close too soon. It's important that we go through the steps appropriately. So let's focus on a few key ingredients. So first, call the people and then see the people. That is probably the most important part. If you ever feel like you're stuck or you're spinning your wheels, quite often we're focusing on getting sales. We're not focusing on seeing the people. So if you ever feel like you're in a funk, which everyone on this call at some point either has or will, I hate to break it to you, it's just the nature of what we're doing. Oh, I have someone, I'm just gonna, if everyone wants to mute, I didn't know what that was. But if you ever feel like you're kind of in that funk, you just need to see more people. Just get in front of as many people as possible. That's the quickest way to get out of if you feel like you're kind of in a bad cycle. In number 4 and 5, just tell the story, close the sale. So what's in it for me? What is the purpose for calling on families? When we get an active listener on the phone, what is your message? So these are 2 questions that are really important to ask as you're making your calls. So what is our purpose for calling? I won't ask because most of you are muted, but if your goal over the phone is to convince families that they should pre-plan, you're going to have a really hard time. And it might be 2 or 3 days before you get an appointment. If instead our focus is just to deliver a personal wishes organizer, get face-to-face with the family, and build the relationship from there, you'll find your appointment setting rate goes up drastically, immediately, and quite frankly, it's just more enjoyable. You don't feel like you're trying to sell over the phone. So when we get an active listener on the phone, our message is very simple about delivering the personal wishes organizer, not about convincing them about all the benefits of pre-planning. So when I'm calling on families, do I use a script or do I just say the first words that come to mind? Every training group we have, Michael can attest to this, Travis, even many of you that have been in training, there's always someone that just says, oh, I hate scripts. I don't like scripts. They feel fake. They feel forced. That is all true because you're not comfortable with it yet. But the only way to get that to start to feel natural is to use it. So any movie you've ever watched, any play you've ever watched that sounds so natural and they bring you to tears or they make you laugh, it feels natural for them, but at some point that was a script that was uncomfortable. They didn't know it. And then they practiced and practiced, and then it did become natural. But you have to follow a script or things will get off track pretty quickly. So again, the definition of a prospect is someone who does not own and is willing to listen. They don't have to commit to us that they want to pre-plan. They just have to say, yes, I'm willing to talk with you either now or at some point in the future. So our job when calling the families is to sell the appointment. The minute you start to sell our product or opportunity, that's when they kind of start to pull back. I can always tell when someone calls and says, over the phone, I'm getting XYZ objections. I'm getting questions about cost of insurance. I'm getting questions about, I don't know if I want to spend that much on a casket. We can immediately tell that we're overselling on the phone. You've got to pull it way back, make it very simple, short. Kelly and I had a really good talk about this yesterday. I fell into a trap when I started about just kind of going overboard on the phone. And then I found it actually became harder to set an appointment. You want them to be interested in meeting with you. So save all of that for your in-person visit. So you're getting a family to have to ask the question, why should I take time out of my busy schedule to listen to you? Basically, and this you can make in your own words. We'll have this recorded. It'll be on the YouTube channel. But if I had a program that could save your family from tremendous grief and heartache, as well as potentially save them thousands of dollars, do you feel that might be something worth learning a little bit more about? When you've got someone on the phone, I mean, how hard is it anymore just to get someone to answer the phone, first of all? But when you've got them on the phone, you want to make sure we're doing everything we can to at least get them to acknowledge that, yes, this might be worth my time. Now, they might not set an appointment today, but they may say, all right, Diana, that's fine. Good point. Can you call me back in a couple weeks or a couple months? So plant that seed. Gosh, if I had a program that could save your family a tremendous amount of grief and potentially save you thousands of dollars, do you think that might be worth learning just a little bit more about? Give it a shot. I mean, the worst thing they can say is no, which they were going to do anyway. So you have to make sure you're giving it your best effort while you have them on the phone. So what should you focus on when setting appointments? This used to be one long script. I've broken this into bullet points. You obviously don't want to say all of this with, every response, but it's important when someone says, well, what's the personal wishes organizer? What is that? I don't even understand why that would be valuable. So here's a few talking points. So first, our personal wishes organizer contains 90% of the information that your family will need when the time comes. That by itself makes sense to people. This valuable guide will provide information regarding vital statistics, emergency contacts, cemetery, and funeral preferences. Those who have used the organizer have told us they don't know how they could have come in and had to have planned a funeral without it. There is absolutely no cost. It is simply our way of sharing a very important message with families in our community. We believe that every family should be prepared, and this is the first step. If you don't have at least 2 of those memorized, I would encourage you to work on that. You need to have a very solid answer. When someone says, what is a PWO? And you just say, well, it's a planning guide. Well, that's the same thing. So they don't understand what that means. So you have to be able to build some value in the personal wishes organizer. And the bottom piece is true. There is no cost. It's our way of sharing an important message, and we believe that every family should be prepared. Whether they buy or not, that is true. And you have to believe that. You will get in front of more families if that's what you focus on. So assuming that most of your calls result in some kind of objection, do you have a plan for overcoming them? Quite often, if we hear an objection, and I've heard it, I've done it, everyone's been there, we feel like we should apologize. Erin, it's just not a good time. We're just too busy to talk about this. Okay, I'm sorry for bothering you. I'll call you back in a few weeks. Don't apologize. You need to have a plan for almost anything that someone's going to say to you, which is what we'll talk about today. So are we really fulfilling our purpose when we give up with the family over the phone? Because who knows when we're going to get them back on the phone. So one objection handler that fits most over the phone, you've all heard versions of this, but this is so critical that you just focus back to the personal wishes organizer. So let's say, for example, you know what, I'm just going to be cremated, and actually I think my kids are going to take care of it. Let's say both of those objections are in one. You know what, I understand that, Mary, and thank you for sharing that with me. That's exactly why I'm calling. Our personal wishes organizer is designed for families like yours who are thinking about a simple cremation and whose kids will likely be in charge. Should a death or accident occur before your arrangements are completed, you will at least have them written down in this book. As you probably already know, there are dozens of decisions that need to be made in the first 24 hours after a death. I'm sure you'd agree that having all of those decisions made and written down in your book could alleviate some emotional stress on your family. I'll only need about 20 minutes of your time, and there's absolutely no cost to you. I actually am going to be by to deliver this gift. Our afternoons or evenings better. So you have to really have a pretty powerful statement when someone gives you an objection and view it more as part of the conversation. How often do we hear, well, you know what? I'm Travis, I'm a veteran, so the VA is going to handle all of that. And then we get a little defensive. Well, sorry, boy, you sure don't know what you're talking about. That's not true. We have to be really careful. So instead, you just say, you know what? Thank you for sharing that with me and thank you for your service. That's exactly why I'm calling. And you go through the same thing. Almost any objection they give you as to why they feel like they're not going to pre-plan can be handled with this objection. This is not the time to get into, but you don't understand. By pre-planning, it locks in the cost, it guarantees it, and you can pick out your casket and emotional overspending. Don't get into all of that. That's what you want to deal with in person at the either at the funeral home or at their home. So I would memorize this for sure, some version of this. This will help you tremendously over the phone. It also helps you get your conversation back on track, which we've all had those that get way off into the weeds. So, okay. So when all else fails, I have a lot of conversations with people that feel like they just get stuck over the phone. Also, this also works in person, but you know what? They said absolutely not. We've got this insurance policy, and I know I probably should talk about it, but we have insurance. It's going to take care of it. Just get away from the money. Michael Escalante, who I think he's in a meeting, so he's not on, but he had a great line where he would just tell people to leave their checkbook at home. So even if you say, you know what, Mary, it sounds like you're probably not going to fund your pre-plan, but at the very least, let's get you the book, let's get you the planning guide, start to get some of your wishes documented, and you know what, leave your checkbook at home. That's totally fine. We'll at least help you be a little bit more prepared than you were yesterday. Get away from the money. If we are on the phone are trying to get them to kind of funnel towards making a financial decision, they're going to pull back. If we just say, you know what, I used to say this to families all the time. Bob, this may or may not work for you financially, and honestly, I'm fine either way. I'm happy to just get out of the funeral home. I would love to meet you in person. At the very least, you'll be a little bit more prepared. I'm going to come by tomorrow. Is morning or afternoon best? It's not aggressive, it's not threatening, but get away from the money. I would say that all the time. It sounds like this may or may not work for you financially right now, and that's fine. Don't feel like you have to convince them over the phone or sell them over the phone. Hopefully that makes sense. And there's versions of this in person too that we can talk about. So the most effective close, we've said this 100 times, but the most effective close always begins with the better presentation. The better presentation will result in fewer objections. So as you're newer, this is sometimes the part that's challenging. When you're newer, you'll get the most objections that usually you'll ever get within your first 6 months, because as you get better at your presentation, you learn how to get ahead of those objections. You also get better at building that trust and emotional urgency. So naturally those objections go away. So don't get discouraged if you feel like you're getting a lot of objections initially. It will get better as your presentation gets better. But look for patterns. You know, if you have 4 people in a row say they need to talk to their kids, there's probably something you're saying that's planting that in their heads. So even if you want to record your presentation, have someone sit in with you, but look for patterns. That's always the quickest way to kind of see where we can help. So the best way to build value is to get the family involved emotionally. And you have to create a sense of urgency. If you're not creating that urgency by building value, they'll almost always just say they need to think about it. Now it's just a commodity product. They're going to figure out their money and their checkbook and talk to their bank and see what they can do. You want to get away from that. You have to create that emotional urgency. West has talked multiple times about our 10 emotional questions. You should have your own version of that. The more emotionally involved they are, the less objections you're going to get. So handling objections, we're going to go through these kind of specifically. So remember that objections should be viewed as a natural part of your presentation. Don't get discouraged, but be encouraged that they're engaged and still willing to discuss with you. It means that they're looking for a solution. Be prepared and confident in your responses and you'll surprise yourself. I always was way more concerned with the family that was just smiling and nodding the whole time and never said anything negative, never pushed back, never had a question, because I knew they weren't going to buy because they weren't being real with me and we weren't able to have a real conversation about their objections. So I welcomed objections. I appreciated them. Be very aware, though, of your body language. If someone at the end says, and I have seen this happen, well, we need to talk to our kids, and then your response as the counselor is, I thought you said you didn't want to burden your kids. I mean, if you're getting defensive, if you're acting that way, they're going to respond how you respond. So if you just view it as a very calm part of the presentation and now it's just having a conversation, you will see an immediate difference in your results. So be aware of your body language, your breathing patterns. Are you turning red? I mean, I know it sounds silly, but I have seen all of that happen. So we're going to kind of go through these one by one. So first objection that we sometimes get, we've now figured the cost on the cost estimate sheet, and someone will say, how much is the interest, right? We've all heard that question. Bob, good question. It's actually figured based on cost of insurance and a few other factors that change based on age and a few other things. Once I fill out this enrollment form, I'll actually have more information and be able to better explain that to you. Now, Bob, what is your birth date? Now, everyone, well, but we have to tell them, obviously, and we are going to tell them, but this isn't the time to disclose all of the information about the cost of insurance. We have to explain it in pieces and answer the questions as they come. We always want to disclose that cost before we leave, but we don't have to tell them all of it all at the same time, because then they get overwhelmed, they get confused, and they won't make a decision. So good question. It's actually figured based on cost of insurance, a few other factors. Once I fill out this enrollment form, I'll have that information and be able to better explain it. Now, is this your best mailing address? Have some transitional question. Even if it's not birth date, you should have 4 or 5. Now, the follow-up then to that, now that you've filled out the enrollment form, okay, so how much will we pay for the insurance? Be very careful here that you don't over-explain it. Again, if they're confused or overwhelmed, they will not buy. So, good question. You have 6 months actually to pay in full without any additional cost. 1 year, it's just a flat fee of only $150. Quite frankly, Bob, if you go the full 10 years, the cost increases quite a bit. You can, at this point, even tell them what it is. But it's still a better option than waiting 10 years or so and paying what the costs would be at that point. As we've discussed, you've probably told them funerals double about every 12 years. So, plus, you'll have the benefit of the insurance protection during that time, which means if you were to pass away unexpectedly, the rest of your funeral plan would be paid off by the insurance company, and you can pay it off early at any time. Now, let me also tell you about our grandchild rider. Switch subjects. So, again, you answer it very calmly, and this is where your advisor hat has to be on. They have to view you as an advisor. If you're flustered during this part or struggling to find the right words, they're going to lose confidence, and then that transitions, and now they feel nervous because they feel like you're nervous, and they're not going to make a decision. So make it short and sweet. It should not be any longer than this. There will be more questions and there will be more explanations, but be aware of not over-explaining it the first time the question comes up. So this one, we all have heard this, right? We need to talk to our kids first. I think my very first appointment I went on, they said this. So great, I understand how involving your kids in this decision would be important. After all, they're the ones who will be taking care of things when you pass away. Thankfully, most of the decisions and costs will already be taken care of. In our experience, Bob and Mary, we have found that the number one concern for children is that they're fulfilling their parents' final wishes, as you're kind of nodding and they're nodding. So why don't we do this? I use this all the time. It worked most of the time. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and complete the paperwork today. You can contact them over the next few days and tell them it's all done. And that way we can just make any changes once you've visited with them at any time. If anything comes up, I'll come right back out and answer any questions. Fair enough? What's the best phone number? So you're not arguing with them. You're not disagreeing with them. You're not making them defensive. You're actually confirming that, perfect. I'm glad to hear you're going to talk about this with your kids. Let's go ahead and get everything written up while we're all here together, while it's fresh in our mind. And then once you've met with them, if they have any questions or if they'd like me to come out, we can go back through everything and make any changes at any time. Fair enough. What's the best phone number? So this one you should have dialed in super comfortably because you're going to hear this. You should be prepared for this one. It should feel very natural. So I thought about putting like a devil's face on this one because this is one that people really hate. But you'll actually learn to appreciate this objection. And I promise the further along you get in your career, at 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, you'll hear this less because you'll get better at your presentation. So don't get discouraged when you hear this. So the dreaded, we need to think about it. So you have to prepare for this, of course, in all objections before your presentation begins. I used to visualize this objection before I even walked into the house so that I could feel comfortable that I would be answering this not with the right words necessarily, but with the right energy. If my energy was defensive, if I was nervous or flustered, or they felt like I looked disappointed now that they're saying this, I knew it wasn't going to go well. So I visualized this objection. Be positive when you're responding. The more positive you are, the less defensive they will become. A couple points to consider. The biggest one is, a lot of people call this the ghost objection because it's not really an objection, and we now need to kind of get to the root of what the real objection is. So once you find that out, we'll talk about how to do that. Is there then a solution for the real objection? For example, if their objection is we need to talk to our financial advisor, which we're going to cover, that's a real objection and we can handle that. If their objection otherwise is, well, Armand, you know what? We just don't have any money. We are dead broke. We have about $20 a month left at the end of each month after we've paid our bills for medicine and food. There's not really anything you can do there. And I wouldn't encourage you to force that. You can try to talk to their kids, see if there's someone else that could pay for it. But there are, we can't create money out of thin air. So just be aware if it's a real objection. If someone says, well, we've already pre-planned with you or someone else and you didn't find that out between now. I mean, there are a few things that you just can't move past, but most of the time when you find out the real objection, we can move past it. This objection, when someone says we need to think about it, you have to be willing to be honest with yourself because it means one of two things. We're overwhelmed, we don't understand everything, or we're not totally convinced this is the right decision, which also comes back to trust. So you have to look at how much time are you spending at the beginning of the presentation building that trust. If you're in the pie chart talking about costs and prices within your first 20 minutes, you probably are not building the right amount of trust, and you're going to hear more people say they need to think about it. If you're spending the time asking the questions, you're going to hear this less often. So if they're overwhelmed, then that might be a matter of making sure you're not over-explaining pieces of it or under-explaining. Maybe give your presentation to someone. If you hear this 2 or 3 times in a row, please call one of us. We'll sit down with you. We'll Skype with you through a presentation. We can usually pinpoint in a few minutes what can help. So don't get discouraged. So here's the first. There's a couple ways to respond to this objection. You know what? Thanks so much. We just need to think about it. Bob and Mary, I can appreciate that. Generally, when I feel like I need to think something over, it means one of 3 things, as you're nodding. 1, I'm not ready to deal with it for whatever reason. Number 2, I'd like to do this, but money's a concern. Or 3, I really like the idea, but I don't quite understand all of my options. If you don't mind me asking, which of these best describes where you're at right now? So it's a very non-threatening way of simplifying what may kind of be overwhelming for them and allowing them to say, hold on, I've got someone I'm just going to mute here. Let me see if I can. Okay. So getting them to kind of be able to verbalize. Now, most often, I won't ask this. Normally I would, but everyone's muted. Most often what they say it's the money. So and that's actually great. That's a great response. If they say it's the money, that's something we can work with. They might just say, you know what, I still don't really understand why we need a cremation container, or I'm not totally convinced we're going to use Thomas Miller. Whatever it is, just they'll be able to kind of, you're helping them find the words because they might not know the words. So that's a really great objection handler. The second option for this, we need to think about it. You know what? Of course, we actually find that most families we meet with want to discuss things with each other and their families in case any changes want to be made. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Well, yeah, we want to talk about this with our families. They'll say some version of that. Oh, let me close that out. But so once they've agreed that, yes, we want to kind of talk this over, great. Then what we generally do, I use this all the time, guys, this works. If you can memorize a version of this, it will work. So great. What we generally do, assuming you're more comfortable than not, as you're nodding, which they usually are, let's just go ahead and get things written up and started while we're all here together and everything's fresh in our minds. Plus, that way you have the actual paperwork to review and you don't have to go back through this all again at another time when things aren't so clear. Would you trust me in getting that started? That's actually a Welton Long phrase that we kind of incorporated and I really loved, assuming you built the right level of trust. So this one works very well. You're kind of confirming that, yes, they just want to sort of talk things over, which is great. And then you're saying, wonderful. Then while we're here together, while it's fresh in our minds, let's get it all started. And then you'll have the actual paperwork to review. You don't have to get back together. Would you trust me in getting that started? This is a time, if they really push back on that, I never say to people you have 30 days to cancel. Never, ever, ever. But you do, I would say, plus you've got 30 days to look it all over or make any changes or just decide it didn't feel right. That would be fine too. And they'd say, okay. And I had a very low cancellation rate. It allowed people to move forward with the comfort of knowing they could make any changes. So those are two very good options for the we need to think about it. If then following up, I think, can everyone just mute theirs? I think there's just some feedback coming and I don't know how to mute it for you. I don't know if everyone is. Most people are. There's just a couple with some feedback. Okay, thanks. So after you've now gone through that, they say, you know what, Erin, thanks so much. We just need to talk about it first. Okay, this isn't where you now fold up. Well, I tried it once and now I'm leaving. You have to give it a few shots without being aggressive or pushy. So, Mary, I totally understand. Again, we find most people feel that way. May I just ask if there's a specific part of this that you're more uncertain about? You know, is there anything about Evans Brown or the facilities? Is there anything related to the choices and services or casket we've made? And they'll usually say no. No, great. I love the funeral home. I like the casket we chose. So maybe is it then the cost that you could be concerned with? So we're trying again to kind of tease out, narrow down to the actual objection. Usually they'll say yes to that. Then you're, again, another alternative choice. So would you then say, Mary, it's the overall total cost or the monthly investment that you're more concerned with? Almost always they'll say it's a monthly investment. At this point, you've got a sale, by the way, if you continue correctly. You just now have to find something that's comfortable for their budget. So many families find that their budget doesn't allow for everything to be done all at once, and that's okay. We're letting them know, social proof, that's okay. We review the pie chart in full so that there are no surprises when the time comes, but there is no requirement that you start with everything all at once. Let's look at breaking it down so it wouldn't be such a strain financially. For example, let's just get started with the top half of the pie chart. And then you just start calculating. You don't ask if that's okay, if you can move forward, you just move forward. If you're able to kind of, again, just really narrow it down and isolate the objection, and if the objection's money, you quite often will still get a sale. So don't get discouraged. If they say we need to think about it and we just need to talk about it, these are some great responses. If they have traditional life insurance, if you don't mind, I'd like to share with you, and you just share your experience. What we found occurs when this is left to traditional life insurance is, one of a few things. First, quite often the family won't receive the funds for 60 to 90 days after passing, which means they have to take out a loan or put the costs on a credit card. Second is the costs of your funeral will likely double by the time you pass away, assuming someone's in their 60s or 70s, eating away a big portion of that policy. But this is the most important part. But most importantly, I want to explain that this will do nothing to relieve the emotional burden from your children when the time comes. So remind them when you started. That's why we asked that question on the umbrella. Would you share with me why you feel pre-planning so important? What do they almost always say? Remove that burden, right? So when we started here today, I know you said how important it was that your girls wouldn't have to come in unprepared on such a difficult day. Your life insurance will do nothing to comfort them when the time comes. Let's get this started. So get back to the emotion. We need to talk to our financial advisor. I always loved this one. So that it's very important that you have the appropriate level of trust built. If they view you as an advisor, this will go a lot farther. If they don't, if you've just been real friendly, but maybe they're not seeing you as an advisor, this one's a tough one. So make sure you're really focusing on being an advisor. But Bob and Mary, let's just assume I have no doubt you have a wonderful financial advisor, but let's assume you go talk to her and she advises against pre-planning because she thinks she can get a slightly better rate of return on your money. It's all financially driven. She can get a little more money, and they'll kind of be nodding. Based on what you've shared with me earlier about why you think pre-planning is a good idea, do you think your family would be better or worse off by moving forward with this today? So you're jumping to kind of worst case scenario. Financial advisor says, no way, I can get you more money, which probably isn't true, but who cares? Assume they say that. Okay, so still knowing that your financial advisor, let's fast forward 15 years, got you a slightly better rate of return. Do you think your family is better or worse off if you had moved forward today or not? Get back to the emotion. I rarely lost a sale to the financial advisor thing because I just got back to the emotion. Well, I'll take that back. I lost a sale once to the financial advisor objection, and it's because I tried to argue about who would get more money and rate of return, and I backed myself into a corner, and it was ugly, and I said, I'm never going to let that happen again. So get away from the money, get back to the emotion, and you will usually be able to work past that one. And now if someone can't decide between cremation and traditional burial, this is usually towards the beginning of the presentation, but this is where you share your story as to why you got into this business. We see families having to make heart-wrenching and difficult decisions for their loved ones every day. If it's hard for you to decide this today, how do you think it's going to be for your kids? Let's just assume hypothetically that you passed away yesterday and your spouse chose traditional burial. How would you feel about that? Now, sometimes they'll say, oh, I hate it. I hate the idea of it. I do not want to be buried in the ground. Okay, well, then it sounds like you are more comfortable with cremation. Is that correct? And start going that way. If they say, well, I'd be fine with that. Now, if money is really a concern, get away from the money. Let's assume cost isn't a factor. What would you prefer? Because you all are at funeral homes where you can still be very cost effective on a traditional burial and allow for that. So if cost is the only factor they're choosing cremation, I would encourage them to still look at traditional. But you don't want to move forward to making decisions about the money until they've made a decision between cremation or traditional. It'll just get too complicated. We can talk more about that after if anyone has any questions. So if you've done everything you can, you've done a great job, you're an advisor, and they say, you know what, thanks, John, we're just not going to do anything tonight. You know what, I understand that you just need some time to talk about your decisions. While we're all here together, just so I don't have to bug you back on the phone, I did this with Kylia just the other day, let's just set a date to get back together next week. And then you hold up your phone, you point at their phone. It's a crazy social experiment. This happens every time. Hey, is your calendar on your phone? They'll pick up their phone. Okay, and is next Tuesday or Thursday better? If you didn't get a sale and you feel like they're going to do it, the first thing we're usually going to ask is, when is your follow-up appointment? You don't want to now be chasing them back down on the phone. Try to set that follow-up appointment. So remember, everyone, practice makes confident. It doesn't make perfect. None of us are perfect. But you want to get that confidence, gain enough confidence that you can work through these so that you're not stumbling, so that you don't erode that trust. And that just comes from studying and practicing. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but I want to open it up for anyone that wants to stay on. Any questions about specific objections? Everyone's muted, so if you guys want to unmute. Maybe. Does anyone have any questions? You guys can type too if you're not able to chat.
Aaron, this is Travis. I don't really have a question, I have a comment.
Yep.
That was a great presentation. You just got to be, I love the comment you talked about earlier about being confident in that. If you feel like you're speaking across the table to some of your close friends or family, 9 times out of 10, you can talk to those people and overcome any objection you have. But if you don't have that relationship built up from the first, then you'll never get over even the smallest objections. So that's a good point.
Right. I mean, I think that's I think the confidence level is more important than the words. If, you know, don't worry about messing up what you're supposed to say. Just focus on how you're saying it and your energy. And are you being defensive, or are you just having a conversation? And yeah, you're right. Just look, how would you talk to your parents or your grandparents or your neighbors or your friends? Just have a conversation and be confident in what you're saying. Don't apologize. Thanks, Travis. Okay, anyone else before we wrap it up? Okay, you can always call us if you're ever in an appointment and you heard an objection. I would challenge all of you, if you leave an appointment and just go, oh, what happened? I thought that was going so well, or you just felt like you didn't know what to say, please call any of us. You can call me or Travis or West or Michael. Heather even knows. I mean, we are all here to help you. You don't ever feel like you're alone or you're stuck. There's an answer for anything that happens out there, and I promise we've all been there multiple times. So thanks for taking the time to be on today. If no one has any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I hope you have an awesome afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Erin.
See ya. Oh, and John, yes, I will record it. It's been recorded and we'll email out the video. It'll be uploaded to the YouTube channel. So good question. You're welcome.
Thanks, Erin.
You're welcome.